Strive and Thrive is a collection of discussions featuring guests from various fields, focused on guiding entrepreneurs in creating businesses that excel in every aspect: people, planet, and profit. Throughout the series, you can join us, Romesh and Mike, as we explore relevant topics with our guests which can help businesses thrive.
Romesh and I met while I was supporting a client transforming their business, and I needed finance director support and reached out to him and his team. Since then, we've become good friends who share a passion for business and entrepreneurship. If you like today's discussion, then you want to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our latest episode with Alan Evans. Alan has been running a successful coaching business for 7 years, helping senior professionals to step up to their leadership role with confidence. Alan's someone that I met when we were both in the early stages of building our own current businesses, and I've personally gained lots of inspiration and insights from him. Alan, hello. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Romesh, and thank you for that introduction. Very nice. Very nice.
No worries. Brilliant. So to start off with, could you briefly tell us about your career journey to date?
Sure. Yeah. So out of university, I my first role was as a secondary school teacher in geography. So teaching 11 to 18-year-olds. After 6 years, I made a change. I retrained as an accountant, and I worked with a number of UK retailers over a period of about 20 years before making another change. And I've got myself accredited as a life coach and an executive coach, and I've been building up my coaching business, as you just mentioned, for the last 7 years.
Really great, Alan. Really lovely to meet you. That's an interesting career, very different. Teacher, finance director, and now into coaching. What's made you move into coaching, and what is it about coaching that you enjoy?
I think at the stage of my life that I'm at, with the experience I had from teaching and then in finance, it actually felt like a really natural move. I can see why it might not look like that, but I think the parts of those roles that I really enjoyed were working with people, trying to get more out of people, sort of tapping into potential. And I think actually there's also perhaps not always seen as a part of a finance director role, but that sort of caring kind of pastoral side that maybe was more evident in my teaching kind of reared its head again, and it just felt like the right thing for me to do.
Yeah, very good. You talk about tapping into potential. I like that. What's your why do you think coaching is so important to tapping into potential?
Oh, great question. I think that there's something about being able to have a conversation with somebody where you can kind of maybe take the shackles off that you have in your day-to-day role. I like to talk with my clients about living in a world of possibility. So imagining what might be possible rather than that pragmatic kind of probability world that most of our roles sort of keep us in. So coaching, particularly in industry, but actually for individuals as well, sort of navigating their own life decisions, having somebody to sit with and the time and the space to just sort of really sort of dig deep to think, what do I really, really want? And what might I be capable of if I put everything behind this? It's kind of, yes, it's a really powerful conversation, and then it's a really exciting thing to watch as the client discovers what is in there. Because when I ask those sorts of questions and when I encourage clients to think about those things, I have absolutely no idea where they're going to take it. And
Really,
that's where the potential lies, and it's buried deep often, you know.
I think it's interesting that you talk about options or art of the possible. I think there's not a lot of conversations that go on when businesses are very focused and almost very constrained around what standing up and looking out. We did a recent podcast which talked about Periscope and looking up. Yes, you look back, which a lot of people do, but actually looking up and out, it is a kind of nice analogy. And I think finding and reframing the time to do that is such an important exercise. Can you give a couple, you don't want to know names, but can you give me a couple of examples where you've helped people really move beyond their existing paradigm perhaps and use coaching to help explore new opportunities for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Perhaps if I can give a couple of examples, and I'll deliberately sort of maybe find some contrast in there. So one of my youngest clients, really talented individual, not in a leadership position, but I'm coaching her within the organization. And she said a phrase which will probably stick with me for the rest of my life. But she said, if I'd been given real self-belief, I could probably be a CEO by now. And sorry, I get a little bit emotional. And I listened to that and I said, okay, so who needed to give you the self-belief? And she said, oh, you know, people get it from their parents or friends or whatever, but you know, I haven't had it. So I said, but you could be a CEO. And yeah, absolutely. I think that's possible. I could be running my own company or whatever. And I could just sit quietly. And while she kind of realized, well, okay, so I've got some self-belief because I can see that's possible, and I'm not that old, and okay, so maybe there's still time, and maybe I don't need someone to give it to me. And as you described, Mike, I'm sitting and watching a person completely shift in their understanding of what might be possible. Now, they didn't leave there with an action plan of how to become a CEO in the next 12 months, but it wasn't off the table anymore. And suddenly it was something that might be worthy of consideration. And then if I can just go to the other end of kind of life spectrum, I guess, I actually coach completely outside of my typical client, but I coach a guy who's in his 80s. And I was actually asked to coach him by his daughters, and they were really concerned that he'd kind of lost his mojo. He'd been a really successful business person, and still had a kind of watching brief over quite a big chain of businesses. And they fed back to me just before Christmas that he, and this was his words to his daughters, was, I was counting my days, but I'm now ready to write my next chapter. And it was just, again, it's that sense of, oh, hang on, for some reason I decided when I was retiring, that's the end, but there's no rules. It doesn't need to be. He was already planning this, but he's actually moving with his family to South Africa. But in his mind, initially, it was kind of just to be somewhere warm for retirement. But he's suddenly got a really long list of things he can't wait to get there to do. So again, it's that shift to not into necessarily definitive actions. And, you know, I can't always sort of say, right, there's the result that happened from there, because it doesn't always happen that quickly. But, you know, both of those people are approaching their life with a perspective of amazing things are possible. They've got, I didn't convince them, I didn't persuade them, I didn't tell them anything, I didn't even advise them. I just watched them discover it for themselves. And that's where coaching could be powerful.
They're really lovely examples of what you've talked about at the beginning, which you talked about in theory, you know, helping people think about the art of the possible, the options, the potential. It's just helping them reframe their current understanding of what almost words become barriers, correct? And
Absolutely.
helping
Language
them
is
realize it's just a phrase, and break away from those and understand how you can reframe something and really think about what it looks like, or better understand your context and reframe it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, Mike, that word reframe is just so key to how we manage our lives. It's like, okay, we've all got our life and we're all seeing it through our eyes, but we choose how to see it, and we choose what it is that we're looking at, because it's our life. And as soon as we decide, actually, this is, this is not, I'm not looking at a really challenging situation where I've got to compromise and make trade-offs and be satisfied with this path. Okay, I get to choose a different way of looking at it if I want to. But actually doing that is quite difficult on your own. And it's definitely not impossible. I don't believe everyone has to have a coach. But I do believe that for most people, it's a lot easier if you have.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think we've had lots of podcasts where we've talked about the emotional journey for entrepreneurs, leaders, and founders, and I think you're really touching on that. Everyone is interested in skills, but the more we get involved, and your two stories there amplify this beautifully. It's really much more around the emotional experience that individual is going through, or the founders at that point in time, with the context of their business and the role they're playing. And it's helping them understand their context and helping them reframe it. I think those examples are really powerful. Romesh, what's your view on coaching? Sorry, Alan, finish off.
Sorry, Mike, just something there I just wanted to pick up on, which again is a really strong point. I think that when I'm working in a leadership context, I'm often asked to focus on a skill. So can you come in and can you work with our senior leadership team on giving and receiving feedback, on delegation, on team dynamics and things like that? And I will. But generally, those kind of challenges, or managing difficult situations is another one, managing difficult relationships.
Yeah.
That I can teach you the skill, but you could read a book. You can learn this. If you want to learn how to delegate, I'm not as good as a textbook at the skill. But actually, why aren't you delegating? Well, maybe you haven't got the confidence in your team. Maybe you aren't ready to let go of enough control. Maybe you feel like you need to achieve everything because that's what gives you value. They're the sorts of issues, the underpinning challenges are what we need to deal with. And that's what I will work on, while the individual feels like, great, I'm working on delegation. We're in the same room, but I'm working on their confidence. And that's where you're spot on, that actually many organizations come to me and ask me to work on skills, and then I'll be working on the emotional stuff that's underpinning that.
Yeah, really good. It's a common theme we're seeing, Romesh. What's your view on coaching, Romesh, and what Alan and I are talking about?
Oh, I love it. I think it's incredibly powerful. I think one of the phrases you used just now, Alan, unlocking potential, I think that's says it all, very neatly, doesn't it? I think everyone has something that holds them back and, stops them from achieving that potential. But having someone, or even a group of people, I mean, everyone's different, and, circumstances are different. And I see coaching in the sense that we're talking about now, but also in lots of aspects of life and business. And if you have that support, which enables you to reflect and helps you build confidence and break down those barriers that are just resisting and pushing back against your progression, I think, that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. It's liberating, isn't it? I mean, in terms of my views of coaching, I try and incorporate an element of that in terms of what I do as a finance director. And that's something that Alan and I have in common. We're both, Alan has been a finance director for a long time. That's obviously a significant. That's what I do now, and I think to be a great finance director, you've got to have emotional intelligence. You've got to be a good listener, and you have a unique position to be the right hand of the business leader or business leadership team in the most meaningful way. And to be meaningful and effective, I think you do have to lean into the emotional side of things as well. It's not just about technical support from my side. So yeah, for me, in my own informal kind of way, I try and incorporate a bit of that mentoring and understanding. And actually the key is listening. The key is listening as an external advisor. I'm sure, Mike, you do that and focus on that in terms of your business as well. So yeah, I think it's incredibly powerful. One of the liberating things for me, and I use the word liberation, actually quite, I think it's a really good word, is, when I became a founder, I realized I had all of these hang-ups and issues that I needed to get over. And actually, I didn't even realize I had all of them at that point in time. And one of the great things for me now is that I've built up this bank of confidence because I've overcome gradually lots of these things, and it's really empowering. I feel happier, more joyful in my life because I'm not afraid of challenges in the way that I might have shied away from stuff in the past. Don't get me wrong, we've all achieved good things in our careers, but it's nice to keep going, and actually you tend to avoid areas that you're least comfortable in, don't you?
You do.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was it. Sorry, it's a long-winded answer to that, but yeah, I really see the power in it. And Alan, coming back to you, I am fascinated by your journey, how you got here. And I was thinking about it the other day, but actually, when you look at it, geography teacher, finance director, coach, you kind of think, oh, that's a bit haphazard, that's a bit zigzaggy and meandering. But actually, I think there are a lot of common themes, right? As a geography teacher and as an FD, you had to be a mentor, you had to be a leader, you had to support and serve people. And it's obviously something that you've always had in you. And this is just another way for you to do that and completely focus on it. Would you say that those elements of your career, your past careers, have informed and helped you?
I would. So in each of my careers, I've certainly benefited from skills and experiences I've picked up in the previous career. I guess I would point out, so you made it sound like it could be quite strategic, and there might be some really sound logic behind that path. I think that would be being very generous. So the reality is I see them very much as career 1, career 2, career 3, rather than it being any kind of logical progression.
Yeah, no, I get that, but I think I guess I'm trying to pull out a common thread or common threads in that path, even though it was not necessarily, certainly the intention from day one or even day 1,000, whatever it was, but actually there are common themes in there which hopefully helped you on the next stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what did they have in common? They are things that I was really interested in. They were things that I could become really passionate about, and they were all things that I could see a path to. I'm going to use the word excellence. I think instinctively my brain seeks perfection, but as all of my clients are bored of hearing me say it, that can be the enemy of progress. So but they're all things that I could get really excited about how far I could take them. So I think they were the things that they're the real similarities that work for me. Without any of those things, I think I would have struggled to make a success of them. But absolutely, you know, I think we can very easily switch ourselves off to the idea of a career that's completely different to the one we're in, thinking, well, you know, the language I hear often is, well, I'd be going right back to the beginning. And the reality is you never are, because you've just learned so much, or just developed as a person, that you're never going to go back to the beginning, whatever you choose to do.
That's a good message and a good insight. And, you know, how about that journey from being an employee to setting up your own business? So it was actually a skill that you had newly acquired with your coaching qualification, but you were also setting up a new business. So that's a big leap.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'll be completely honest. It was a leap of faith. I didn't really know. I think I had confidence that I would find a way, and confidence probably from my finance background that the things that people said they were worried about, you know, whenever someone said to me, I really worry about my own business because of, and they talk about the finances or business plan or tax or whatever, and all of those things, I just thought, I'll solve them. I'll be able to find the solutions for them. So I kind of probably stepped into it, maybe even underestimating what setting up a business involves. I do distinguish. I'm self-employed. I work for myself. I do have somebody supporting my business, but working for yourself as a business is very different to starting up something where you've got employees and there's more than just you in the business. So I feel like I've got the easier end of that side. Yeah. Do you want me to touch on what I found difficult?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm very, very comfortable talking about why I found it easy.
No, tell us what was challenging.
Yeah, there were two things. I was going to say there were, but there still are two things. One, I didn't realize at first, but I actually really struggled with a sense of isolation. So I'd worked, you know, I'd come out of a business where there were hundreds of employees. It was always office based, so hybrid working didn't exist. It was pre-COVID, and that just wasn't an option. And I had a really big team, so I was constantly in demand. If I wanted any peace and quiet, I needed to go and hide away or shut my office door or something. And suddenly, when I was working for myself, it was the polar opposite. And actually, if I didn't make an effort, I would literally not see another person in a work context from one day to the next. And I thought that I loved working on my own, and I thought that would be perfect, probably because I just hadn't really had the experience of it. And what happened was I actually just started to really feel flat. And I don't think I did a very good job of working out what was going on. And my own coach helped me to kind of identify it. And it was effectively, it's just, well, you've just unplugged. And whilst coaching is obviously interacting with somebody, it's a different relationship. So I didn't have anyone on my side, didn't have anyone to share my goals with. That a really odd thing to say, but if I didn't do any work, nobody would care. And that's a really difficult thing to get your head around, because it made me realize, which links onto the second thing I've really struggled with, is I can sometimes lack motivation. And I thought I was a really driven individual, super focused on goals and achievements. But through nearly 30 years of employment, I realized they were other people's achievements or goals. So I would do stuff because I wanted to make sure I got my job done and people would see the value I'd added, and my boss would be happy and I could get a great mark in my appraisal and all that sort of thing. But actually I hadn't really learned the skill of doing it for me. So then I set up my own business, and obviously each individual client needs me to be on my game and doing a really great job for them. But outside of that, there was no pressure to do anything, to get my next client, to build my business, to get my financials sorted, to think about, how am I going to continue to learn and develop as a coach. All of that relied on me to drive it. And I wasn't set up for that. I just hadn't really even appreciated that. So everyone talks about, it's lonely at the top, whatever. But actually, as soon as you step into working for yourself, it's lonely, and your drive can just disappear if you don't proactively go and find the solution for it.
You use very past tense words there, Alan. So I assume you've found your drive, goal, purpose in your business now, or in what you're doing, or your ways of balancing your own self-motivation when you're not supporting others. What's your kind of thread and nugget of that allowed you to move forward?
It's a great observation, Mike, and actually maybe that reflects how I am today. So the sort of that sense of being disconnected I've dealt with. So I've dealt with that either by I make sure, certainly if I'm working in a kind of executive coaching space, I wherever possible I do that face to face. So whether that's traveling somewhere, or usually on site for the client, occasionally at home, I will try to get at least some of my clients face to face. I have somebody working for me, and arguably I could manage my business without that, but actually it's not a financial decision. It's a emotional well-being decision. It's better if I've got someone working with me. So they are. And I think if I look at my calendar, because I plan my calendar weekly and monthly, if I look at my calendar and think actually there's 3 consecutive days there where I'm home based, I'm not going to see anyone, I will go and set myself up in a shared office space or sit in a cafe or something, just so that I'm not literally on my own. So that's how I deal with the risk of disconnection. The motivation one, I don't always win that game. So I know what works for me. So being really clear in what I want to achieve in the week, making sure I've told people, and being really clear in my why. So what am I doing in terms of business development this week, and why is that really important to me for my business? I will set that out and it will work really well. If I don't, it doesn't. So I still do have times when I find my motivation waning and I have to go and proactively rev it back up again.
Interesting. Have you found what motivate? I'm trying to find the right framing of the question now, because I think this is an interesting area. How have you found that experience driving you towards motivating those you're coaching? Because you must see the same experience, and I think there's a question in here that I'm trying to get right. How have you found the purpose in helping people that's also helped you, I guess, in that example?
Yeah, it's. I mean, the key to this for me is self-awareness. So. Why did I struggle for a long time with this? Is because I didn't notice it. I knew I wasn't feeling very motivated, but actually if you'd asked me sort of maybe even 18 months into setting up my business, I would have told you, I'm not sure I've done the right thing, because I'm not loving it. And actually it was a misdiagnosis, if you like. So, and as soon as I, with the help of a coach, as soon as I'd managed to identify, well, what's going on, when do you feel good? That's a great question my coach asked me. Is, okay, so you're feeling really a bit flat and demotivated. When do you feel good? When do you feel really great? And I was able to articulate really clearly at these times and that day, and it's then you sit there, just as I described for the client, the light bulb goes on. You think, oh, I can see why that is. And actually, turns out, whilst I'm quite an introvert, it turns out I work a lot better if there's someone sat next to me or someone else interested in what I'm doing. And so I think I've probably learned a lot about coaching from being coached. That's a given for me. I've had various coaches over the years, and in their own way, they've all been different, and some more effective in certain areas than others, but they've all added value for me. I think it's what really hammers home that point to me about self-awareness. So my job with my clients is to help them to see what's going on. So how are they feeling, and why is that? When do they feel great, or when are they at their best, and why is that? Let's unpick it. Let's understand it. Okay, now you know what needs to be in place for you to do amazing things. How do you do that more often? What can you change so that's the default? And it's never easy. Otherwise we do it all the time, wouldn't we? But for me, understanding when I'm at my best, then every day I'm effectively making a choice. Do I set myself up like that? And do I be at my best, or do I not? And I sometimes choose not. Can't really explain that, but and I'm suboptimal sometimes because I'm human. But that's how it's worked for me. I don't know if that was a long-winded answer, Mike. I don't know if it answered your question.
It very nicely did, and I think you talked a lot at the beginning. I'm going to try and reflect on it back to you, and see if it resonates. Is you said at the beginning is about helping people find options or opportunities, and see and reflect on themselves. And I think what you're saying there is, in doing it yourself, you realize that self-awareness is one of the key criteria for your own experience, and that's what you're trying to mirror or inflect on all those people you're working with, and going, if you can work out your own self-awareness, your own self-context, what things work for you, where you're happy, what things you need wrap around you. The point of having an employee, is it efficiency or productivity or a skill? Nope. It's about building an environment that I enjoy working in. And I think there's more to business in the world we talk about that is orientated like that than is in skills and productivity driven approaches. And I think that gets lost in a lot of training and mentoring schemes that are out there at the moment in terms of helping founders and leaders. We did a really strong podcast last year, it was now, on middle management and the challenges of people become middle managers. They're often very skilled, probably the best in skills. They get promoted and suddenly they're what's called a manager and managing other people. And that is such a big leap. And that's an emotional journey. That's not a skills journey. And I think readiness for that kind of context is important. You've talked there about being a founder and a starter of your business. Same sort of sudden jump.
Absolutely.
You're suddenly in such a different world.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I think the idea that if you're great at a skill, then you automatically are a great leader in that skill is absolute folly. You see it in football, and some of the best footballers that then have epic failures as football managers. But equally, if I go back to teaching, and actually the teaching profession took some strides to address it, but there was a real challenge for me about. I'd become a senior teacher fairly early in my career. So I think I was 28, 29. And if I wanted to step up anymore, it was deputy headship, which meant maybe 30% of your time being in the classroom, which is that was the profession I'd chosen. And 70% of the time in an office doing budgets and resource management and timetabling and dealing with parents and governors and all that. I was just, no, that's a different job. I don't like that job. But it's that sense of, well, that's what happens to the best teachers. And you sort of think, well, this is really tough. And exactly as you said, I thought, great, I knew I would be able to learn the skills of coaching, and I'd done my qualification, my accreditation, to make sure that I had a proof point, so I could point to something and say, look, I know how to do this. But at no point did anyone else, or did I say, but do you actually know how to run a business? And I just walked into that thinking, well, I'll solve that along the way. Thank goodness I didn't have a bunch of employees and some.
It's interesting that's
to manage.
It's interesting that's what you found the most challenging. It's really interesting that's what you found the most challenging. It wasn't what you expected when you started. It was something completely unusual, almost by not looking, and it hit you as a surprise.
Yeah. How about for you, Romesh, when you stepped out of industry effectively and set your own business up? What did you find?
Yeah, I found this part of the discussion really well. I identify with so much of it. So much of what you said, Alan, resonates. So the isolation definitely hit me, and we both set up our businesses after COVID as well, and I think that was an accelerator of that feeling of isolation. And I'm very much an extrovert, actually. I like hanging around people, but I'm also pretty independent too. So I didn't really consider that it would be an issue, and plus I was speaking to people on the screen quite a lot when I started my business. But I quickly realized that it's not the same as actually real physical being in a room with someone or with people. It's a very different thing. So yeah, I had the same experiences, and I solved that for me by doing a few things, because it was around the COVID time, there was a personal thing as well, because people we'd been trained because of the lockdowns and stuff not to go out as much, and that became a bit of a habit as well. So I did a couple of things. I mean, from a business perspective, I really focused on actually trying to go out and see clients face to face as much as possible, network face to face, as well as doing the digital side of things. But I also took the opportunity to grow and build the community of consultants that I have now, and that was a key driver to that. Was that, well, number one, I suppose, I was able to grow, so I needed the support. But for me, growth on its own wasn't exciting enough. I wanted that sense of community. I wanted to feel I was part of something and to belong to something that was special. And for me, that was creating this community of FDs that learn together, share problems, insights, and share the same values, and try and passionately help growing businesses. That's how I kind of define that. So that's how I was able to do that. And self-discovery, that's key. I just learned a lot about myself, that self-awareness that you both talk about, both good and bad.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's helped and informed me. Mike, when you've got a business where you employ a number of people, Mike, when you started, I believe you started on your own and then kind of expanded out too. How about your own personal experiences here?
Yeah, I was kind of worried you were going to ask me this question about self-awareness and whether or not I was like, what's going to be my answer? So I don't know is the honest answer to my answer. Yeah, I do reflect on a lot of what we do, and I think I wouldn't say I found it lonely. I found it empowering at the time during COVID, really giving me an opportunity to have a bit of freedom. But I was in an environment where I suddenly needed that. I think. I think the bit I found was I needed people to engage with and to really help me understand what the art of the possible was, which touches on Alan's question, and what I really could do, and what the ambition could be for what I was trying to set up. And I found a close group of friends to really kind of help me talk through that. So I haven't formally had a coach as per someone like yourself, Alan. But what I have done is found friends, other entrepreneurs, individuals in similar environments or experiences to kind of validate questions with. And sometimes it's skill based, right? I'll be honest. Sometimes I'm like, I need a bit of skill advice. But most of the time, it's an emotional experience. What do you do when you're suddenly slightly panicking about cash flow? It's not about what you do tactically about cash flow. It's how do you manage the fact that you're panicking about cash flow? It's a different answer to the same question almost.
Were you completely on your own at the beginning, Mike? Did you always have a team? No.
I've always been into sort of setting up businesses and things like that, but I suddenly one day went, I'm just going to do it. And I think my biggest hurdle, and I've talked to Romesh about this before, was thinking I'd need all the answers before I started. And it was once I got over that hurdle, and that is self-awareness in that sense. I was like, no, Mike, you really don't need to know who your first customer is, how it's going to work, where all your money's going to come from, how you're going to build it, how you're going to make it repeatable income, revenue streams, whatever it is. You just need a few answers. And then you go looking and you learn. And I think that's part of where I got the validation myself.
Yeah, that's good. And actually, I think, you know, we should probably kind of, certainly from my perspective, I'd couch that kind of feeling of being isolated at the beginning with lots of positive stuff. You know, I loved the freedom. I really did love the freedom. I loved being in control. I loved working to my values. And that was, well, I've used the word liberating. It really was liberating. But actually I had to adapt to get the most out of that sense. So something that Alan mentioned earlier was, you know, having, you know, not the motivation, but sometimes the discipline, because there is no one holding you to account. I think that's the key thing. So I realized I had to hold myself to account. And I did that by forcing myself to structure my day. And being a bit of a finance geek, I did it on a spreadsheet, and I kind of timetabled, and I was like, yeah, this is when I'm
proud of you.
Yeah, I have to be working and doing business related things meaningfully and authentically at these points, you know, during the day. No excuses. Because what I found was I would sometimes meander, which is something you don't really do when you're a leader at a bigger business, when you're an employee, because, you know, there are lots of people around and you've got lots of things driving you forwards. But as Alan said, you know, those are other people's goals and objectives. So it's a different thing.
Romesh, you make a really important point there, actually, in terms of the distinction, whether it's discipline or motivation. But actually what I wrestled with and still sometimes do is finding the balance between flexibility or freedom and structure. And
yes,
sometimes I will think to myself, maybe I'm tired, maybe I really want some freedom. I want a day off this week, or I want chunks of time within all of the days this week where I can kick back. And maybe I'll sprint a bit in between to make sure I'm making good progress, and knowing that that's okay. Whereas, you know, when you've had 25 to 30 years in an industry where that just 100% isn't okay, you know, think about teaching. Every 45 minutes there's a bell, and the bell tells you to pack your things up and walk to the next room and do the next thing. And, you know, there was zero freedom other than your lunch break when you get to, I don't know, host a detention or something. You know, that's the ultimate in structure, isn't it? And then knowing that you've got the opportunity if you want to really rebel and have total freedom and go to the beach all the time, or whatever, go and watch Cash in the Attic or whatever's on in the daytime. So, and somewhere in between is the kind of the real gold for me, where actually I really want to have that sense of freedom and flexibility, and to be able to choose when I work and when I don't, because it's my business, my terms, but also recognizing that I'm wired for structure, and I need to find a healthy balance that works for me.
Mm-hmm.
The bit I can relate to on that, Alan, is I'm taking the motivational angle to a slightly different lens. Is one of my challenges, and it's similar in the sense, is that I am always going to tinker and experiment. So I'm on all the time, if you see what I mean. I'm not looking for freedom. I'm looking for the next problem I'm going to fix.
Yeah.
And for me, that's similar. I've had to force the discipline on the routine, because otherwise I'll find myself writing a new business model or a way of predicting the stock market or developing a new equation. And I think that's the challenging, in my sense, if you see what I mean. Mine's a different type of motivational blocker, but mine is about, hang on a minute, why are you building a new app? You've got all these other things you're doing at the moment. And it's that self-awareness to be able to manage that is my context, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And just we're all running our own businesses, but I'm just listening, and just the differences between us is where coaching is so inspiring for me, because I'd love to be able to say, oh yeah, I've got this coaching program, and how could I be really efficient? Would be, I could go to a folder, think, right, I've got another exec client coming, right, it's lesson 1 or session 1, I know what goes on. I don't. And Romesh, you've asked me before, why have I resisted podcasts? Is because I really rebel against the idea that I'm an expert. So I don't ever want to be on a podcast or guesting anywhere or writing something where I'm putting myself forward as an expert in coaching, because I'm not. What I am is somebody that's really committed to being an expert for my client. And at the beginning, I'm not. And I need to learn all about them and work really closely with them before we ever even agree to get into a coaching agreement. Because before I start, I need to know that I can add loads of value for that individual. And probably 80% of the people I might meet in that process, maybe I can't, or maybe I could add some value, but others would do a better job. And this is I'm listening to the differences in you two, and then comparing to myself and just thinking, we're just all so unique. And I've yet to meet a client where I thought, great, this client's just like that client I had last year, I can use a load of that stuff again. Happen, because we're just all bringing our own stuff, and we've all got our own brilliance buried somewhere, and we can all sometimes benefit from having some help to unlock it, and that's just the best job in the world. Amazing,
Alan. And Car, so can I get you to answer that question? Why did you decide to appear on kindly on Strive and Thrive?
One, Romesh, because we've known each other for quite a long time now, and I just knew that you just would never shut up about it until I did, so I gave in. There's the bit of honesty that slipped out. Sorry, and we can't edit it out, can we?
That's it now.
Yeah,
it's out there forever.
Yeah,
love it.
But I think the real answer is, you asked if I would be open to coming on and talking about my experience, kind of my take on life, on business, on how I can work with people, and I can do that. I think if you'd ever said, oh, going to introduce you and you're going to talk about, you're going to be our subject matter expert on coaching, and all things coaching. I don't want to do that. I don't feel qualified to do that. There are thousands of people out there that will tell you they're a coach. We've all got our own version of what that means. If you want me to talk about my experiences, I'm okay with that. And which is why I'm here. And you are absolutely my first, possibly my last podcast guesting, but
not after this.
But you're right.
No, definitely not after this.
I've resisted.
I think one of the things we're aspiring for on this, and I think you've done this superbly well on this podcast, is lived experiences. If we can talk about lived experiences from yourself and how that, and Romesh and I gave some of our reflections against what you've said, that's what will help people understand whether or not they're in need of coaching. And that's when they'll start to think about it. I think, and your point at the end, which is what I've written down as my big takeaway from this, is that everyone is unique. Everyone is unique. Everyone has their own situation, their own context, their own history and experiences and terminology and lexicon, and their own potential. And I think it's helping them navigate that is where people like yourself, Alan, can have a big impact. And we know that founders and leaders need that type of help.
Of course, I mean, we can all benefit from it. Absolutely. Mike, I think you summed it up really well. And I am pretty much every day in awe of just how much potential people have. Just blows my mind. People that, and I can't always see it at the beginning. Sometimes there's a bit of we've used the phrase leap of faith a few times today, but sometimes I'm not quite sure what they're really aspiring to, and we need to work together for a little bit. And then people will tell you something, or people tell you something that they think might be possible for them. And you just thought, wow, I just did not see that coming. And it's that's the key, is just working out what that is for ourselves and for each other.
Really good. Fabulous.
Alan, I think, wrapping up, my takeaways are, the unlocking potential, which we talked about at the beginning, the self-awareness that, you were so open and transparent about your experiences. And I'd echo Mike and say, that was really powerful. And thank you for being so literally open about it. That's tremendous. And actually, when it comes to unlocking potential, I'm really glad you agreed to come on this podcast, because actually, I think you've demonstrated why, you'd be an amazing coach, because you do listen, you do deeply care, and you do truly appreciate the uniqueness, and you're able to draw on your own experiences, as well as obviously your qualifications, to bring quite a powerful, package of genuine support. And I love that.
Oh, thank you. That's really touching.
Fantastic. Brilliant. So thank you again. Thank you very much for joining us. We're really grateful that you did select us as your first podcast, first of many, I would say.
I'm steeling myself to say it's been my pleasure. But actually, you to be able to put me at ease on something like this, you guys are amazing at what you do. I also am not a great consumer of podcasts, but actually I do follow yours very closely. And Mike, you used the phrase lived experience, listening to some of your guests. Well, all the guests I've heard, and how they bring their experience to their subject matters is fantastic to hear. So great job.
Thanks very much, Alan. Great to speak to you.
Thank you, Alan. And thank you, everyone, very much for listening or watching. We hope very much you enjoyed today's episode as much as Mike and I did. Strive and Thrive is a podcast for entrepreneurs, founders, and business leaders. Please like, follow, and subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Strive and Thrive.